Okay, welcome back to our podcast. On the phone with us is State Representative Dan Ugaste. He is a state representative in the western suburbs. It basically represents Geneva, St. Charles, that area of the state. And we invited Dan on because he has a bill out there, HB 843, that is there to rein in any governor's power. Mm-hmm. So we just saw that last week on July 23rd, one day prior to his executive order ending, Governor Pritzker extended again until August 21st a number of his COVID-related executive orders. And the opposite is happening with a citizen initiative in Michigan to rein in Governor Whitmer's orders up there, which were over the top. And so, Dan, tell us more about your bill, your legislation, which I read through. I think it's very common sense. It doesn't even require just the legislature to get involved. You can have 3 out of 4 leaders make a decision in the wake of an emergency situation. So you left a lot of room for negotiation. But the bottom line here is that Pritzker has had a lot of control, and he seems to be sounding the alarm that he may go ahead and mask us up again, lock us down again. Mm-hmm. What do you see is coming up?
So thanks for having me, first of all. I appreciate you allowing me to be on the podcast with you. The bill, let me just quickly summarize what it's about and why I brought it forward and filed it in the General Assembly. A year ago, this is the second time I filed it, actually. I actually filed it last May as well. I was seeing that what appeared to me to be pretty clear Illinois Emergency Management Act statute saying the governor has 30 days under which he can use emergency powers. Mm-hmm. It was being extended repeatedly without any challenge within the legislature or by the courts saying that they agreed that, he only has 30 days. And to me, this seemed to be an affront more to not the way things were being handled. I wasn't even trying to assess that, and that's not why I have filed the bill again. It's to protect our system of government. We are a representative democracy. We have been. We are at the federal level. We are at the state level. And when we have one person who is allowed to declare continuing emergencies unchecked, completely unchecked, and just go forward with them and take on powers and authority that normally are reserved for 177 people in the legislature to agree on with the governor, at least a majority of those people to agree on with the governor in order to pass a law or create a rule that the public has to abide by. What we've had is someone now for 17, 18 months or more proposing rules, or not proposing, putting rules in place that 13 million people have to follow. That's not our system of government. That's not how we operate. And it's not just about this governor. This is to prevent any governor from going forward. So basically, what the bill says is that at the end of 30 days, a governor can declare an ongoing emergency or issue a new proclamation for the same emergency. But at that point, within 5 days of issuing that proclamation or continuing the emergency, they have to get approval of 3 out of 4 of the leaders within the General Assembly or a majority of the Assembly members themselves. And it's because we need to have input from the legislature regarding any emergency or alleged emergency that is going on. And we don't have that. We haven't had that. That's what our system of government's about. What I learned going down there, I learned it from the people who were there, are the people most in touch with the members of the general public. It's not the governor's office. It's not the department heads. It's, in fact, the legislators and the representatives. We have them coming into our offices, calling our offices, contacting us by email, however, all the time. So we need to be the ones that give input. And there's no way one person, even as governor, even with all the staff he has and department heads he has, can know what's going on in every part of the state or what's in the people's best interest. That's why we are there as a legislature, to work together to govern the entire state.
I have a couple questions for you. The first one is, you're obviously a representative who takes that role seriously and understands it properly, and you would think that there would be a number of legislators, a majority at minimum, or we would hope, that would want to take back the power of the legislature to make decisions for the people they represent. Have you been invited into any meetings with leadership on the Democrat side of the aisle, who you would obviously need to get some of them on board to get this bill passed? Has there been, what's been the reaction?
Yeah. Was it even heard
the majority
in committee?
Party? Was it even heard? Yeah.
And do you have any Democrat sponsors?
I was not able to get any Democrat sponsors. I must admit I did not talk to all 73 of them, but I did speak with a number of them and did not get any sponsors. I tried getting a hearing in committee. As you know, we're under a new speaker now, so everything gets pushed out of rules. But this was shoved into executive, where it was left to sit and never receive a hearing, even though I did request one, and our leadership supported me in requesting one. So nothing was given that way. And even when the opposition was proposing a new bill on the House floor that would address an ongoing commission to give advice to the governor on issues concerning the ongoing situation of the COVID health crisis, that I brought this to everyone's attention. I let them know I have this bill out here. This is what we should be considering in order for us to actually have authority and have say in what goes on, and in order to protect our system of government, but didn't get any sponsors or any action after that either. So unfortunately, while I have support from a number of Republicans and our leadership, I have not been able to get any support on the other side.
So Dan,
at least not vocal.
So Dan, I assure you, I don't believe that you were in the legislature when Rauner was in charge and he was the governor. And I will tell you, there were a number of bills that the Democrats ran because they had supermajorities there, that they ran specifically to take away the governor's power. And to make it by legislative stance. And these same people now have emboldened their Democrat governor against the people's wishes. And they don't understand the hypocrisy of that, to begin with. Number two, literally, if this were to continue, Pritzker could make any executive order at all that he wanted to. And unless the court supported a challenge on it, he could literally run the state as a one-man show, and that is exactly what I feel is happening here. This does threaten democracy in the state of Illinois, 100%.
Dan, some of the what made the Michigan that was a citizens' initiative, and the reason that it got through was because the governor wasn't able to veto it. Is there any protections against the governor vetoing it? Should you get Democrats to pay attention and run your bill?
No, he'd have the same power to veto this. I think he would have a very difficult time doing so, in that if a majority of the legislature, which would include a significant number of members of his own party, vote for this bill in order to put it into law, I think he'd have a difficult time vetoing it and saying, no, I should have absolute power for as long as I decide. And if that's a position he did want to take, or any governor should this bill come forward, because trust me, as long as I'm in the legislature, I will continue to propose this until it gets passed.
Absolutely.
I think any governor would have trouble vetoing this, because if they have any intention of seeking re-election, because I don't think it would go well with the people.
Right. So
no one wants a monarchy. There was a revolution fought against that a few hundred years ago.
And this is exactly what's happened here. So you should get back to staff, in my opinion, and ask them for the list of bills that the Democrats ran to rein in Rauner's power, and throw it right back in their face and say,
yeah,
you know what, you guys are the biggest hypocrites ever. Because it is wrong. I mean, it is 100% wrong what they're doing. We can't stand it. Let's turn to another topic, though, and that's this. The Center Square just put out a new article. And it says that the Illinois Senate Republicans are calling for a performance audit of the state's unemployment agency, which is IDES. That's how it's known. After a scathing financial audit showed that they say is the tip of the iceberg on fraud. Now, the Auditor General does, under his normal duties, does financial audits of a lot of the different agencies, and they're done on a rotating basis. And some of them have different time frames for when that audit comes up. Well, the most recent Auditor General financial audit for IDES, which is Illinois Department of Employment Security, for fiscal year 2020, it only covered the first few months of the pandemic through June of 2020. And that report found that IDS paid nearly $97 million for pandemic unemployment assistance over the minimum and did not validate wages of all claimants. It paid more than $41.6 million in benefits to more than 4,500 claimants whose identities were not validated. It paid more than $2.6 million to those whose birth dates were the same day or later than the date of the claim. And it paid more than $343,000 to 35 claimants who were dead. And so, this failure is massive, especially when, it is thought that there may be $1 billion worth of fraud that's already occurred during the pandemic timeframe, and that the trust fund is estimated to be, in arrears over $5 billion. Now, I know your colleague, State Representative Chris Miller, also put in a resolution for a performance audit. But, and businesses are up in arms because if this fund is not made whole, it will come out of either future unemployment benefits, which will be diminished to people who actually need them at the time of need, or it will come through a taxation on businesses to replenish that fund. This is something, again, on a bipartisan basis, should be called out, investigated, and dealt with immediately.
I couldn't agree more. I think we need to have action into this. Things need to be reviewed, and absolutely it needs to be fixed. We have been voicing concern with how IDES has been operating throughout this time, the entire time the governor's declared an emergency. They have unfortunately shut their offices, not allowed for any in-person visits, which has, in many people's assessment, actually contributed to some of the fraud.
Sure.
It is not allowed some people who didn't have access early on to certain types of electronic, submissions or computer within their homes or wherever it was, to actually be able to submit claims when they wanted to, and just a whole host of other issues that probably could have been resolved had they been open. But this overpayment, this problem, it is huge. You're right. It's absolutely huge. We have businesses, and as you know, and both of you know, that have absolutely been crushed by this, and many that are struggling to come out of it and still struggling because we continue to overpay unemployment and to an extent, and that's a different issue. It deals with the PUA and the whether or not people need to be looking for a job at the present time, now that we're out of the health crisis for the most part, but that are struggling to get back on their feet and are going to have to start paying in more money into this fund in order to make it whole once again, because the fund can't stay in debt forever. We have borrowed that money from the federal government.
That's right.
And starting September, the federal government has waived interest on it to date. Starting in September, we have to start paying interest on that. And if the numbers are where they're estimating, the $5 billion or more, it's estimated we'll be paying about $100 million beginning in September in interest on that money. It's not something we can afford or want to do because that comes out of the General Revenue Fund.
That's right. That exactly right.
That comes out of the General Revenue Fund is my understanding. So that's a huge problem for the state of Illinois. We don't have extra money to be throwing around. That's money we need for education, for people with disabilities, for a whole host of other issues we don't fund at the levels we should be right now.
Honestly,
that aside,
Go ahead.
We are in the hole, and we have to help these businesses because, like you said, if we don't do this, if we don't make it whole, for which we could use the ARPA money, and that's something I've advocated for both, in talks and on the House floor and in various places, that we use that money from ARPA to reimburse this fund and make it whole again, or else our businesses that are struggling are going to have to figure out a way to pay us. And they just finished paying off the bonds they'd had to take out from the last big borrow from the recession in 2008.
Yes,
2007.
right. Yes,
they paid it off in 2019.
Right, we were in arrears about $3 billion, if I remember correctly, and that had to be paid off over time because we never replenish our funds like other states do. We pay outsized benefits as well. I mean, this is just a ridiculous thing. Okay, last thing before you go, because our next segment that we're going to talk about is Exelon closing 2 plants. I mean, they flat out said now, we're you know what? These are getting decommissioned. We are in that process now. We're not fooling around anymore. They failed to get an energy deal done. And for your district, that included closing a coal-fired plant that basically supplies all the electricity to Geneva and St. Charles. So there's this massive deal. Don't you think we need to, at this point, do a piecemeal?
I think we need to do something that addresses what we can agree on at the present time, absolutely, if that's what you're referring to by piecemeal, and I think it is. But I will tell you this, the Prairie State and the other clean energy coal plants that were recently built really need to be left alone. Those were state-of-the-art technology at the time, and it wouldn't only affect those 2 towns you talked about, affect Batavia as well. So 3 of the towns in my district would just be absolutely economically crushed if that plant's forced to close early. They bonded out on that and bought into that plant, thinking they were buying in on cutting-edge clean technology that would provide them with electricity for years to come. When they bought in, those plants were estimated to have about a 70-year life. Right now, they're just hoping to get through their bonding period on those, which would give them about 40 years of use. So, we can't do that to municipalities and other areas. And it's not just those 3. There are other municipalities that are invested in that plant as well. When they think they're doing the right thing, trying to be as clean and environmentally conscious as possible at one point in time, and just because maybe something's changed a bit about technology, say you lose all your money, you're on the hook, you're on your own. We can't do that to people. Yep. We'll never get investment in clean technology again in this state if we do that.
Well, the one thing that we never have in this state is honest conversations surrounded by the real facts. And we're never going to solve our problems. And if they destroy our energy market, goodbye, Illinois. That is the nail in the coffin. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. We'll definitely have you back in about power and even more stuff. So we appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you having me. Have a good day.
Thank you, Dan.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.